Most people try to fix their wealth by working harder, by adding another shift, another side job, another sleepless night of figuring things out. We hustle, we strategize, we read books about abundance and mindset. But what if the very thing draining your prosperity isn't out there, in the market or in your career, but quietly humming in your own kitchen? What if your prosperity is being slowly, gently unraveled by your midnight meals? That may sound strange, even superstitious, but stay with me, because this isn't about fear, and it's not about food rules. This is about rhythm. In classical Feng Shui, fire is not just heat, it's intention. It's energy expressed. And every time we light a flame after dark, we send a message. Not with words, but with pattern, with timing, with disregard or reverence for natural flow. Think of your stove, your gas burner, your electric coil, that one spot in your home that brings warmth to ingredients and transforms them into nourishment. Now imagine doing that after 9 p.m., when the body is winding down, when your space is trying to sleep, when the natural world has already entered its yin state, and we override it with yang. That flame doesn't just cook your food, it speaks. And what it might be saying is, I'm still in effort, I'm still in chase, I'm not ready to receive. You see, in many Eastern traditions, particularly in Feng Shui, and echoed in certain Buddhist monastic rhythms, late-night fire is considered a signal of imbalance. It's the body and mind pushing beyond their natural tide. And when that becomes routine, it creates a contradiction in our space. Our homes try to rest, but we keep stirring. Our energy wants to settle, but we ignite again. Over time, this repeated gesture doesn't just exhaust us, it subtly interrupts the way fortune flows toward us. In today's video, I won't ask you to fear fire or to never eat past a certain hour, but I will offer a new lens, a quiet framework for thinking about when and how we cook, especially at night, especially after effort, because timing matters. And in Feng Shui, even one subtle shift in timing can ripple through the way your space supports you. If that idea stirs something in you, if you've ever wondered why, despite your discipline, your finances still feel a little brittle or elusive, I invite you to walk with me through this reflection. And before we go deeper, if you find value in these quiet conversations, I gently ask that you support this journey. A like, a share, or a comment helps this video reach others who may need it. And if you'd like to help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers, I'd be deeply grateful if you join the New Day Mindfulness community. We're not growing fast here, we're growing true. Now let's explore why the flame you light after dark may be telling a deeper story than you think. 1. Fire has a clock. We often think of fire as a utility, something we summon at will for warmth, for flavor, for function. We flip a switch, light a match, press a button. The flame appears obedient. But in the old rhythms of Feng Shui, fire was never seen as neutral. It was not just energy, it was time made visible. In traditional cosmology, fire corresponds to the element of yang: brightness, outwardness, motion, digestion, decision, assertion. It belongs to the sun, to high noon, to the height of summer. And like any element, it has a clock. Yang, by its nature, rises with the dawn. It grows, peaks, and then softens. And by sunset, it retreats. Not because it's weak, but because that is its nature. It bows so yin can rise, so quiet can return, so restoration can begin. But when we ignore that rhythm, when we ignite fire long after that arc has passed, we don't just cook, we disrupt. A late night stir fry, a boiling pot of soup at 10:30 p.m., a microwave humming at midnight. To our eyes, it may seem like nothing, a simple dinner, a quick snack, but energetically, it's akin to shouting into a room that has just fallen silent. Lighting fire after dark is not a neutral act, it's a declaration. It says, I refuse to slow, I reject the stillness, I will override the dark with heat and motion. And the problem isn't moral, it's mechanical, because fire has a clock. It was never meant to blaze at midnight. In the language of Feng Shui, nighttime belongs to yin, the quiet, the internal, the breath that deepens. Yin is the realm of sleep, healing, subconscious recalibration. It's when the body goes inward, the spirit unknots, and the environment resets. So when we spark yang at the wrong time, when we push fire into yin, we create a kind of subtle friction, an energetic contradiction. And contradiction, repeated daily, becomes confusion. You may begin to notice it, not as disaster, but as dissonance. Your digestion may slow, your mind may race at bedtime, you may wake up foggy, not because you didn't sleep, but because your internal tides were stirred too close to rest. And over time, that dissonance echoes outward, into your mood, your money, your motivation. Because energetically, fire is about transformation. It's how we convert effort into outcome. But when mistimed, that transformation becomes wasteful. Like stoking a furnace no one's sitting beside. Like pouring light into a jar and closing the lid. One way to understand this is through metaphor. Imagine a concert. The musicians play, the energy builds, the music swells, and then the finale. Applause and silence. That silence is sacred. It's the echo that lets the music settle, the resonance, the breath after the sound. Now imagine someone after all that walking onto the stage with a loudspeaker and blasting another song. Not in joy, but in resistance to the quiet. That's what cooking at the wrong hour does. Not always, not catastrophically, but consistently. It confuses the silence. In Chinese medicine, this same principle is echoed in the organ clock, a 24-hour cycle that allocates energy to different systems of the body. After 9 p.m., the triple burner in pericardium, systems related to internal balance and emotional regulation are most active. They want calm, they want cooling, they want yin. But a spicy late dinner, a boiling pot, an overlit kitchen sends the opposite signal, and the body listens. It listens not just to what we eat, but when we eat it. It listens to the stove's rhythm, the fridge's hum, the time of light. So what can we do? Do we never cook after dark? Must we live by strict rule? No, we adjust gently. We honor the principle, not the punishment. If you must cook later than usual, keep the flame low. Use broths, not frying oil. Use earth tones, ceramic pots, wooden spoons, a dim light over the stove instead of a bright overhead bulb. Invite softness into the space, even as you prepare food. You're not just feeding your hunger, you're speaking to your home. And when you light that fire, ask, is this for nourishment? Or am I resisting the stillness I'm being called into? Because when you listen carefully, you may find it's not just the food that's unfinished. It's the conversation between your space and your timing. And sometimes the most nourishing thing isn't what you eat, but when you choose to let the flame rest. 2. The late meal and the slow leak. We live in a culture that often romanticizes the late night meal. Whether it's a quiet bowl of noodles after a long day, a comforting bite of chocolate under dim kitchen lights, or the warm leftovers consumed while scrolling through a phone, there's something deeply human about eating when the world feels paused. But in Feng Shui, and increasingly in modern art and health science, there is one simple truth. Not all meals are equal, not because of what's on the plate, but because of when that plate is placed before you. To understand this, we need to step away from nutrition charts and calorie counts for a moment, and instead ask a more fundamental question. What does food actually do? In Feng Shui and energetic studies, food is not just fuel, it is message. It carries the imprint of time, intention, and rhythm. When we eat, we are not only absorbing nutrients, we are syncing with movement. We are participating in the energetic rhythm of our own ecosystem. So what happens when we eat too late? Let's start with the body. In physiological terms, the digestive system follows a circadian rhythm. Enzymes, hormones, and gut motility aren't constant. They rise and fall with the sun. Your stomach acid is most potent during the daytime. Your pancreas, which regulates blood sugar through insulin, is also more active during daylight. Your liver, the great detoxifier, begins its repair work at night. The gut is a factory, but it has shifts. And when we eat late, we're asking the night crew to suddenly start welding in the dark. Studies show that late night eating, especially after 9 o'clock p.m., is correlated with a host of imbalances: elevated cortisol levels, increased insulin resistance, disrupted melatonin production. In plain terms, digestion becomes sluggish, blood sugar becomes erratic, and the sleep cycle gets fragmented. You may fall asleep, but not deeply. You may dream, but wake up tired. Energetically, this disruption is not accidental. It is a signal mismatch. Fire, the symbol of cooking, transformation, digestion, is a yang force. It belongs to daytime. The body expects it to quiet at night. When we eat late, we're injecting fire into yin hours, and the result is not energy, but distortion. Imagine pouring boiling water into a calm lake. You don't reheat the lake, you stir it into confusion. Feng Shui teaches us that when energy doesn't align with timing, it doesn't flow, it accumulates. Not as abundance, but as heaviness. And this is where we begin to see the slow leak. Because that late night meal may seem harmless. It's just a snack, just a comfort. But energetically, it begins to erode something else: your capacity to receive clarity. Have you ever noticed that when you eat too late, the next morning feels sluggish? Not just physically, but mentally. Your mind is foggy, your decisions come slower, your mood is soft but irritable, like a low, undirected fire that can't seem to catch. This isn't just about digestion, it's about rhythm. When you eat at the wrong time, you delay tomorrow's clarity. You send your system the message, we are still working, we are not done. And so your body doesn't rest, your energy doesn't reset, and your emotional landscape becomes muddy. And over time, this subtle distortion becomes a pattern. You start staying up later, sleeping less deeply, waking up not refreshed, but recovering. Your willpower weakens, not because you're lazy, but because your internal clock is misaligned. You eat to feel better, but you eat at the hour that ensures you won't. This is the leak, not a dramatic drain, but a slow, quiet seepage of qi. You work hard, you save, you make smart decisions, but somehow the prosperity doesn't land. You're always a little tired, a little behind, a little short. And in Feng Shui, this is not about failure, it's about flow. When fire through cooking and water through night collide without balance, the result is not synergy, it's steam, cloudiness, obstruction. But here's the deeper insight. Food is not the enemy, timing is. Because food, when offered at the right moment, is not just nutrition, it's alignment. It's a way of saying to the body, now is the time to receive. And the body listens. There is a reason ancient cultures held firm to mealtime rituals. Why monks only ate before noon. Why old farmers sat down at sunset, not midnight. Why your grandmother probably told you not to eat right before bed. It wasn't superstition, it was rhythm. And rhythm isn't about restriction. It's about remembering that energy is cyclical, that prosperity doesn't just come from hustle, it comes from harmony. So how can we apply this? Start small. Notice what time you usually eat your final meal. Not with guilt, but with curiosity. Does your dinner push into 9:30 or 10 p.m.? Are you often snacking after that? Do you feel tired in the morning, even after sleeping? Then try adjusting. Not everything, just 10 or 15 minutes. Finish your meals earlier. Dim your lights after dinner. Let the kitchen become quiet, not just clean, but energetically closed. This isn't punishment, it's punctuation. You are ending the fire so the water can rise. You are saying to your system, now we rest, now we prepare to receive. And if you need comfort, choose warmth, not heat. A cup of ginger tea, a handful of almonds, something that supports your system without activating fire. Because the goal is not abstinence, it's coherence. And coherence always feels like ease. One final story. The actor Hugh Jackman, known for his intense roles in peak physical condition, once shared that during his busiest filming schedules, he maintained one strict rule: no heavy meals after 7 p.m. Not because of vanity, but because, as he put it, I want to wake up in clarity, not digestion. He noticed that when he broke that rule, even with something small, his sleep was shallow, his focus scattered, his mood heavier. It wasn't about superstition, it was about performance. And Feng Shui agrees, you do not manage energy through effort alone. You manage it through placement, through rhythm, through pause. So tonight, when the craving hits and the kitchen whispers comfort, ask yourself, do I need food, or do I need stillness? Because sometimes the fortune you are trying to chase is simply waiting for you to stop chasing it and let it arrive. 3. What the kitchen holds when no one's watching. There is a moment in every household that no one captures on video, no one includes in a recipe reel, and no one posts on social media. It's that in-between hour, after the meal is made but before anything is cleaned. The counters still hold crumbs. The stovetop wears a thin layer of grease. The handles are touched, streaked, and forgotten. It's not shameful, it's human. And yet, in Feng Shui, these unspoken moments carry weight, because energy doesn't wait for a guest to arrive. It flows when you're alone, when your attention drifts, when you think no one, including yourself, is watching. In the language of energy, space speaks louder than words. And nowhere does that silent language carry more potential or more distortion than the kitchen. Most people believe the kitchen's role is simple: prepare meals, feed the body, store tools. But beneath the tiles and timers, the kitchen is the beating heart of prosperity. Not metaphorically, literally, it is where transformation happens daily. Raw turns into nourishment, intention becomes action, heat gives rise to sustenance. And like all transformational spaces, it accumulates energy fast. The challenge is that transformation without attention becomes chaos. A cluttered stovetop doesn't just look messy, it becomes an energetic dam. A pot left overnight on a burner, unwashed and forgotten, doesn't just attract ants, it attracts stagnation. The grease that builds on cabinet handles over weeks without wiping doesn't just age the kitchen, it tells your space nobody's paying attention here. And in Feng Shui, that message is critical, because energy, like opportunity, goes where it feels welcomed. And clutter whispers, not yet. Consider the way we behave when we host guests. We clean, we light candles, we wipe every visible surface. The kitchen shines not because it has to, but because it's about to be seen. But the deeper question is, how do we care for the kitchen when no one's coming over? What signals are we sending then? Because those are the signals that matter most. Not the curated moments, but the subconscious ones. Let's talk about the stove specifically. In classical Feng Shui, the stove is one of the most powerful energy points in the entire home. Why? Because it is fire. It represents activity, wealth, transformation, and the will to nourish. The number of burners, their condition, even how often each is used. These things all mirror the energetic dynamics of the people living there. But more than any of those technical points is the one that rarely gets mentioned: cleanliness. A clean stove does not just reflect someone's tidiness, it speaks to that person's clarity. When your stove is wiped regularly, not polished for guests, but maintained daily, you're saying something powerful. I'm ready to create, not occasionally, not only when inspired, but consistently. And consistency is where wealth begins. Now let's pan out. Look at the counters, the back of the sink, the space beside the microwave. These areas hold objects we use every day, but also ones we forgot about months ago. A spoon of rest no one rests a spoon on, a jar of dried herbs that hasn't been opened since last winter, a blender pushed to the back, covered in a fine layer of dust. We see them, but we stop seeing them. And in Feng Shui, when attention stops moving, energy does too. This is not about minimalism, it's about meaning. You don't need to throw everything out, but everything should be there on purpose. A kitchen can be full and thriving, even bustling, but if it's conscious, it flows. The difference between full and cluttered is attention. The same way a garden with many flowers can still be harmonious if each one is tended, a kitchen with many tools can still invite prosperity, if each tool is part of your rhythm, not your residue. Let's shift to the fridge for a moment. Not what's inside, but what's on top. You'd be surprised how often a fridge becomes the graveyard of forgotten intentions. Expired vitamins, unused cookbooks, a slow cooker box still unopened from last year's holiday sale, and perhaps most commonly, random plastic containers, grocery bags, or old receipts. These things don't scream disorder. They whisper indifference. They say, I didn't know where else to put it. And when your home hears that enough times, it starts responding in kind. Neither does your money, your time, or your clarity. Think of your kitchen like a conversation. Every object you leave out, every surface you ignore, every drawer that jams because it's too full. That's part of what you're saying to the universe. Are you saying, I'm ready to grow? Or I'm too tired to care? Neither is wrong, but both send a signal, and signals compound. This is why in both Feng Shui and the psychology of habit, small actions, especially ones no one else sees, matter most, because they are authentic. You don't wipe the stovetop because a visitor might see it. You wipe it because it is part of your story. You empty the trash before it overflows, not because someone's judging, but because that overflow carries energetic consequence. Rot doesn't begin when things smell. It begins when things sit. Energy follows the same principle. Now let's bring in a story. In 2018, Oprah Winfrey gave an interview in which she described her kitchen habits. Not just her love of cooking, but her insistence on cleaning as she cooks. She said, I can't cook in case. I need the counter clear before I begin, and it needs to stay clear as I go. That wasn't about being fastidious. It was about honoring space. She went on to say that she believed every act in the kitchen had a ripple effect, not just on her health, but on her ability to think clearly. The way I move in the kitchen is the way I move through life, she said. This isn't to say you must become Oprah, but it's a reminder. People who maintain inner alignment often begin by noticing outer friction. The kitchen is one of those places where friction accumulates quickly, but also clears quickly when we are willing to look. So ask yourself gently, what does your kitchen look like when no one's watching? What's in the sink, on the stove, behind the cereal boxes? Not to judge, but to understand. Because the kitchen, more than almost any room, teaches you how you treat yourself. Do you make food but leave the aftermath? Do you store things you don't use but can't part with? Do you open the fridge and feel overwhelmed? Then maybe the kitchen isn't the problem. Maybe it's the mirror. And the beautiful thing about mirrors is you don't have to be perfect in them. You just have to be willing to meet your own gaze, even in the mess, especially in the mess. The next time you finish a meal, take 60 seconds, just 1 minute. Wipe the stove, rinse the pan, clear the counter. Not because someone might see, but because energy already does. And when energy notices you showing up for your own space, it shows up for you in return. 4. Foods that clash with night chi. There's something deeply ritualistic about the meals we prepare and consume after sunset. In the quieting of the world, when streetlights hum and emails stop pinging, many of us find comfort in the warm glow of the kitchen. The simmering pot, the clink of utensils, the scent of food rising from pan to ceiling. But while the heart may feel at ease in these rituals, the body and the space that holds it may not always agree. In classical Feng Shui and within the larger rhythms of elemental balance, timing is not just a matter of schedule, it's a matter of harmony. And nowhere is that more evident than in the food we place on the table after night has fallen. The night is not a blank canvas. It has its own energy, its own softness. The ancients called this yin time, not just in contrast to daylight's yang, but as a reminder, the hours after sunset are meant to receive, not to push, to settle, not to rise. The mistake most modern households make is assuming that food is fuel, always and everywhere. That because our refrigerators run 24 hours and because delivery apps never sleep, we can impose our hunger and our will upon any hour. But in truth, not all calories are equal, and not all foods respect the boundary between effort and rest. Let's begin with deep-fried foods. Few things are as indulgent, as comforting, or as commonly craved late at night. A box of fries, a crispy cutlet, even the sizzle of oil in a home pan feels somehow like reward. But from a Feng Shui perspective, deep-fried foods are heavy not just in density, but in energy. Oil holds fire. It retains it, magnifies it, extends its burn. When that fire is applied to food, and that food is then consumed at 9 p.m. or later, the body receives more than fat. It receives agitation. This is not metaphor. The heat lingers. The internal organs, especially the liver and spleen, begin to brace instead of relax. In practical terms, digestion slows. In subtle energetic terms, the whole house fails to settle. Have you ever noticed how the scent of fried food lingers long after the meal is done? In Feng Shui, that scent is more than aroma. It's residue. It says the fire has not finished its business, and what doesn't finish continues to echo. Next, red meats. In traditional Chinese medicine as well as in elemental theory, red meats are considered warm, dense, and energetically expensive. They nourish when well-timed, but they also demand attention. They are not passive foods. When you eat a steak at 1 p.m., the body is aligned to receive it. Fire supports fire. Yang is high, but eat that same steak at 9 p.m., and suddenly your inner fire, already dimming for the night, has to reignite to process it. And it does so not with ease, but with sacrifice. Sleep becomes delayed. Liver detoxification is postponed. The brain remains fogged longer into the morning. And slowly, imperceptibly, what began as a rich meal becomes a pattern of depletion. The issue becomes more nuanced with organ meats, liver, kidney, heart. These are foods of depth, of intensity. In some cultures, they are prized for their ancestral richness, but they are also the parts of the animal that held tension. In energetic terms, they carry memory. Not necessarily memory of trauma, but memory of labor, of filtration, of complexity. And so when we consume them, especially in yin hours, we are introducing that complexity into a time meant for simplicity. This doesn't mean organ meats are to be feared. They are powerful when eaten with intention. But that intention must include timing. Earlier in the day, when your own yang is ascending, your body can match their story. But after dark, those stories become burdens. Now we move into the realm of spice. It's an interesting paradox how something so small can cause such a stir. Chili, black pepper, cayenne, mustard, these are not merely flavors. They are activators. They ignite, they expand, they pulse, and in doing so, they bring energy outward. In the morning or midday, that outward movement can feel like clarity, drive, even empowerment. But at night, those same spices turn the body's focus away from rest and toward alertness. Have you ever eaten a spicy dish before bed and found your dreams unusually vivid, or your sleep strangely light? That is fire disrupting water, heat overcoming calm. In the rhythm of elemental balance, spice is not the enemy, but it is not neutral either. For evening meals, it is wiser to choose herbs that soothe rather than stir. Basil, coriander, parsley, these are not inert. They still flavor, still ground, but they work with the lowering of light, not against it. Then there are the long-cooked stews. On the surface, they seem gentle. No flash, no sizzle, just depth and patience. But even patience has an edge. In energetic symbolism, stews represent a sustained burn. They have been on the fire too long to be light and too slowly heated to be invigorating. They carry inertia. Think of the way a pot of stew feels when you open the lid, heavy, aromatic, weighted with time. When consumed around noon, that weight anchors, it supports. But at night, it becomes metaphor. You are eating not just broth and meat, you are eating hours of boiling effort. And that effort, absorbed late, slows more than it soothes. Charcoal and open flame dishes deserve a special mention. We associate them with celebration, grills, roasts, special feasts. And yet the timing of that fire is everything. Open flame late at night in Feng Shui philosophy is not invigorating. It is disruptive. It's as if a torch has been lit in a room that was ready to dim. In spiritual spaces, sudden fire after dark is treated with caution. It is not about danger, it is about tone. A bonfire at sunrise is joy. A bonfire at midnight is upheaval. The same applies to our meals. When you cook over open flame late into the night, you are speaking loudly in a time meant for whispers. The energy in your home responds accordingly, not with punishment, but with dissonance. This is not meant to shame or restrict. Food is joy, it is connection, it is memory and culture and comfort. But food is also timing, and the body, much like the house it lives in, listens to rhythm more than rule. When you light a stove at 10 p.m., ask yourself, what am I igniting? A meal, yes, but perhaps also a storm, a delay, a heaviness that could have been avoided. And when you choose instead a simpler path, a soup warmed gently, a tea with grounding herbs, a quiet dish that soothes rather than sings, you are choosing alignment. Let's anchor this in a story. In 2009, Michelle Obama famously began her vegetable garden on the south lawn of the White House. But what's lesser known is that within the residence, she also adjusted the family's eating rhythms, especially in the evening. Meals became earlier, dinners were light, often finished by 7 p.m. Her reasoning was not just health, it was environment. She understood that how the first family lived had ripple effects, not just politically, but energetically. Their rhythm mattered. In interviews, she spoke about how the shift impacted their sleep, their energy, even the mood in the house. We felt lighter, she said, not just physically, but in spirit. That's the point. Not just digestion, not just waistlines, spirit. So as you return to your kitchen tonight, or stand at the edge of your fridge, or light the stove out of habit, pause. What are you truly asking for in that moment? Is it hunger? Or is it an attempt to spark something that should have been kindled hours earlier? There is no moral to this, no judgment, only invitation to eat in alignment, to cook with presence, to rest without residue. 5. Gentle correctives for modern life. Even with all our best intentions, life rarely moves in perfect rhythm. Work runs late, children need attention, guests linger longer than expected. Or sometimes the quiet of evening is the only time we can finally turn toward ourselves, to prepare a meal, to cook with intention, to feel the fire of something warm in our hands after a long day. This is not a mistake. It is simply the shape of modern living. And yet, within that shape, subtle adjustments can soften the edges. While classical Feng Shui speaks clearly about the dissonance of fire after dark, it also offers a compassionate path forward. Not through guilt, but through harmonization. What matters is not whether the flame was lit late, but whether the space that receives it has been helped to return to stillness. Let's begin with light. After cooking past nightfall, especially with high flame or frying, one of the simplest and most powerful ways to reorient the energy of a space is to light a beeswax candle. This is not about aromatherapy or decor. Beeswax, in traditional elemental language, carries both fire and earth. It burns cleanly, anchoring flame into stability. When lit with awareness, not in haste, not as a substitute for scent, but as a closing ritual, the candle signals to the room, the active fire has passed. What remains now is warmth, not intensity. This small gesture is not a performance. It is a punctuation. And like all good punctuation, it clarifies the sentence that came before. In energetic terms, the candle does what our ancestors did instinctively. It seals the moment. Alongside light, air is an equally vital partner in transition. Kitchens hold the weight of heat long after the stove is turned off. The scent of oil lingers in the curtains. The hum of energy stays stuck between tile and cabinet. And so, for those who must cook late, it becomes essential to create a gentle release. Open the windows, not wide, not forcefully, but just enough. Let the space exhale. This does not mean blasting air conditioning or turning on a fan to cool the body. It means letting the walls themselves have breath. In Feng Shui, stagnant air is not just a nuisance. It is trapped qi. It is yesterday's story still floating through today's field. A brief clearing, 5 minutes even, helps the house understand. The effort is over, the moment has passed. We are now in restoration. But beyond light and air, water too plays a role. Fire is the dominating element of cooking, but water is the one that knows how to quiet it, not through conflict, but through balance. One traditional corrective passed down in quiet homes across generations is to place a small bowl of cool water near the stove after evening cooking. This is not to drink or use, it is to absorb. Symbolically, the water holds what the fire left behind. It captures the agitation in its stillness. In energetic terms, it invites polarity. Yan coming yang. This bowl doesn't need to be large or ornate. A ceramic dish with a pinch of salt, placed silently and left until morning, does its work without words. In the morning, pour it out. Not down the drain, but into soil if possible. a return what was held to where it can be transformed. And if we look toward more visual symbols, what the eye sees when it walks past the stove, small grounded gestures can offer profound recalibration. A red cloth, neatly folded and placed beside the stove, speaks to the fire in its own language. In Feng Shui, red belongs to fire, but when placed consciously, it doesn't stoke. It grounds. It says, I see you, I honor your heat. Now let's rest. Similarly, a wooden spoon laid gently across the edge of the counter or resting quietly beside the burner softens the tone of the space. Wood, in the five-element cycle, feeds fire. It does not oppose, but in its stillness, wood transforms intensity into direction. A spoon is not decoration, it is memory. It is the most ancient of cooking tools, one that doesn't shout but guides. Its presence after cooking signals continuity, but also restraint. The fire has served its purpose. The nourishment is complete. Now the space can quiet itself. It's worth noting that these gestures are not about aesthetics. They're not about appearing spiritual or checking a box of rituals. They are about coherence, making sure that your physical space and your energetic intention are speaking the same language. When you rush into the kitchen at 9 p.m., boil pasta, toss vegetables in a flash of oil, and collapse on the couch without pause, without reset, the body might survive, but the home stays slightly off-key. It holds the momentum, even when your mind wants stillness. But when you light a candle, open the window, place a bowl of water, or lay down a cloth, what you're doing is declaring the space finished. You're saying, this room has done its work, it now returns to peace. This becomes even more powerful when we understand that the kitchen is not just a site of utility. It is the hearth, and in almost every ancient tradition, East or West, the hearth is sacred. It is the place where family is fed, where intentions are stirred, where resilience is cooked into every meal. To leave that place humming with unresolved fire is not a small thing. It's like leaving your own breath caught in your chest while trying to sleep. Eventually, the system tightens. Eventually, something leaks. If you need a modern image to root this in, consider the case of Oprah Winfrey. Few people symbolize abundant energy more than she does. And yet, in her own reflections on food, home, and routine, she's often returned to the importance of closing rituals. In an interview years ago, she spoke about the act of finishing the kitchen before bed, not just cleaning, but making it beautiful again. Not for the next guest, for herself. The sponge rinsed, the towel folded, the lights dimmed. So that when I wake, she said, the room greets me, not scolds me. That's the heart of it. Our spaces speak, and they remember how we left them. So if your modern life doesn't allow for perfect timing, if dinner sometimes comes late, if the stir-fry finishes at 9:30 p.m., if the stew bubbles into moonlight, that's okay. The goal is not rigidity. The goal is reverence. What we do with the flame matters, but what we do after the flame, that is what echoes. A bowl of water, a beeswax candle, a window cracked open, a red cloth folded. These are not just tasks, they are transitions. They are the way a home says, I've heard your effort, now let's prepare for ease. And if you take nothing else from this reflection, take this: alignment is not about control, it's about care. You don't need to live like a monk to live with mindfulness. You simply need to listen to the season, to the hour, and to the quiet language of your own space. If the stove must be lit late, then let the room exhale with you. Let the energy close its eyes alongside yours. And in the morning, you'll find that something subtle has stayed. Clarity, maybe, or just a little more breath in the day ahead. Sixth story, the late night habit that changed Steve Jobs. Here's a myth we often tell ourselves about genius: that it doesn't sleep, that it thrives best under pressure, that breakthroughs arrive not in balance but in chaos, that the night is its kingdom, and fatigue merely a badge of discipline. And perhaps no figure in modern mythology embodied that perception more than Steve Jobs. In the early days of Apple, the stories are well known. The long nights, the obsessive loops of design edits, the bursts of temper in meetings that stretched past dinner and into the dark. Those who worked closely with the Jobs described his hours as intense, unpredictable. He'd skip meals entirely, then graze on fruit, or drop into meditative silence at 2 o'clock a.m. The brilliance was undeniable, but so was the burnout. He wasn't alone. So many driven people fall into the same loop, not because they're irresponsible, but because they're committed. When you care deeply about what you're building, the body often becomes a background character. Hunger becomes an afterthought. Meals are squeezed in between code lines or pitches, and the kitchen, if it's used at all, is a place of late-night necessity, not nourishment. But what if even the sharpest minds were not meant to blaze past the body's clock? What if there's a cost, not in output but in clarity? The years passed, Apple matured, then fractured. Jobs was ousted, humiliated in public, then reborn at Next and Pixar. And here, in this quieter chapter of his life, when the noise subsided and he was no longer a boy trying to prove something, something shifted. According to those who knew him then, his lifestyle changed dramatically. The austerity remained, but it softened. He still preferred simple foods, carrots, apples, occasional grains. But the timing became more structured. He began preparing his meals earlier in the day. Dinner became a signal, not of winding up, but of winding down. He didn't talk about it often. But once, in a conversation overheard by a colleague, he mentioned this change with quiet sincerity. "I used to think I needed late nights to be creative," he said. "Now I hear my own clarity more in the morning." It was a throwaway comment, but one worth considering. Because in classical Feng Shui, timing is not just a logistical detail, it's an energetic posture. Fire, which governs digestion and transformation, rises in the middle of the day. That's when the sun is strongest. That's when our organs are most prepared to handle heat, to process intensity. But at night, fire dims. The world turns inward. Yin rises, the pulse of the earth slows. To cook with high heat, to stir-fry under fluorescent lights at 10:30 p.m. is to ask the body to wake up at the very hour it longs to descend. It's not about calories, it's about signals. And when those signals clash, when fire is invited during rest, when digestion is activated during healing, a subtle friction begins to build. For Jobs, whose nervous system was already operating at high alert, late meals weren't just a physical burden. They were a silent amplifier of overstimulation. The fire he lit in the kitchen became one more flame his system had to manage. And over time, that friction became fog. When he changed his routine, when he honored the rhythm of flame and dark, what emerged was not less productivity, but more precision. He didn't stop working. He simply shifted the axis of when he allowed activation. His evenings became quieter, his mornings sharper. That's the part few people talk about. There's something deeply powerful about that. The recognition that brilliance is not a product of constant combustion. That sometimes our most intelligent move is not to push through, but to align. Imagine this scene. It's autumn in Palo Alto. The sky outside his minimalist home is washed in soft dusk. The kitchen is quiet. A single ceramic plate holds steamed greens and grains. The stove, used an hour earlier, has cooled. A beeswax candle flickers softly near the sink. And Jobs, now older, no longer the brash iconoclast, but a man refined by loss and return, sits at the table with stillness. Not because he's lost his edge, but because he's finally sharpened it. That's what alignment looks like. Not performance, not restriction, but presence. And so we must ask, what fire do we light and when? Not just in our kitchens, but in our lives. Do we spark ambition at 11 p.m. and then wonder why we wake foggy? Do we cook under stress, chew without breathing, scroll between bites? Do we eat as if nourishment were a task or a tuning? The lesson from Jobs' shift is not to romanticize minimalism or diet. It's not to copy his meals or routines. It's to recognize the power of rhythm and to understand that even minds as potent as his required recalibration. We live in a culture that worships the overextended, that applauds the entrepreneur who answers emails at midnight, that equates exhaustion with dedication. But what if the true discipline is in restraint? What if the wisdom is not in burning longer, but in knowing when to bank the flame? Jobs' brilliance was never in question, but perhaps his later clarity, the kind that envision the iPhone not just as a device, but as a lifestyle portal, emerge not from chaos, but from coherence. Let us consider that in our own kitchens. Let us see the late-night meal not as failure, but as invitation. To pause, to ask, am I feeding fatigue or fueling alignment? Tonight, if you find yourself tempted to cook late, remember the bowl of cool water, the candle, the red cloth folded with care. These are not rituals for aesthetics. They are gestures of recalibration. They are ways to say, I honor the fire, and I know when to rest it. Even minds that burn brightly must learn when to dim, so that when the morning comes, they rise, not frantic, but focused, not spent, but sharpened. So tonight, as you stand in your kitchen and reach for the flame, pause. Not out of guilt, not from fear, but from awareness. Ask yourself not just what you're cooking, but when. Not just what you're feeding, but what you might be activating. In the quiet hours after sunset, the world is exhaling. Yin rises, the body prepares to heal, the mind to soften, the energy to settle. And while we've learned to chase convenience, speed, and urgency, there's something ancient that still knows. Fire, too, has a rhythm. When lit at the wrong hour, it doesn't nourish, it agitates. It doesn't comfort, it confuses. But when honored, when allowed to burn during the day and rest by night, it becomes an ally, a gentle force that fuels our vitality without stealing our peace. You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need to abandon your meals or force new routines. Just notice. Just shift a little. Cook earlier when you can. Clean the stove with care. Add a bowl of water, a soft cloth, a breath of stillness. Because energy doesn't require perfection, only participation. And when you begin to align, not with superstition, but with your own inner knowing, your space will begin to whisper differently. Not in words, but in sleep that comes more gently. In mornings that feel more clear. In a nervous system that doesn't have to fight through the freeing of late flame. That is the quiet revolution. So I leave you with this. What story does your kitchen tell after dark? One of tension or one of tenderness? And if this reflection stirred something in you, I invite you to carry it forward. Not loudly, not urgently, but sincerely. Please feel free to share your thoughts below. Has your evening routine shifted? Have you noticed what your fire does after sunset? And if you'd like to continue walking this path with me, I warmly invite you to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a humble journey to reach 1,000 subscribers, not for status, but so I can continue offering these quiet insights to more homes, more hearts, more spaces ready to soften. Thank you for being here. Until next time, let your space be still, let your fire rest, and let your fortune rise quietly like breath.